Hello and welcome to the Monday, April 22nd, 2024 meeting of the Wayzata Planning Commission. I hereby call the meeting to order. My name is Larissa Stockton and I'm the chair of the Planning Commission, and I have just a few words about how to participate in this evening's meeting. Members of the public may attend this Planning Commission meeting in person or watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8 WCTV and the city's website at wayzata.org/WCTV. The meeting ID number is 870-3943-9745, passcode 681663. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting in advance or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you'll be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You'll be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. The city encourages comments or questions about items on the agenda, and when possible, requests you submit them in advance by emailing publiccomment@wayzata.org, calling city staff at 952-404-5323, or mailing Wayzata City Hall at 600 Rice Street East, Wayzata, Minnesota, 55391. Attention, public comment. Next, we can move on to roll call. Dr. Gellner?
Commissioner Planton? Here. Commissioner Sorensen?
Here.
Chair Stockton?
Here.
Commissioner Douglas?
Here.
Commissioner Severson? Here. And Chair, please note Commissioner Schwalbe and Elgar absent this evening.
Thank you. All right. Next, we can move on to the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any questions or proposed changes to the agenda this evening? Okay. If not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved. Severson.
Thank you, Commissioner Severson. May I have a second?
Second, Sorensen.
Thank you, Commissioner Sorensen. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, the motion passes, and the agenda for this evening is approved. Okay. Next, we have item number 4, approval of the consent agenda. This evening consent agenda consists of 2 items. We have approval of the meeting minutes from March 11th, 2024, and the approval of Planning Commission report and recommendation of approval for the setback variances at 620 Bushaway Road. Does any commissioner have questions or comments on any item on the consent agenda, or wish to pull an item for separate discussion or action? Nope. Okay. Then can I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Planton.
Thank you, Commissioner Planton. May I have a second?
Second. Severson.
Thank you, Commissioner Severson. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the consent agenda is approved. Okay. Moving right along to public hearing items. We have one on the agenda this evening. The item is consider the development application for comprehensive plan amendment, zoning map amendment, conditional use permit, variance to the west side yard setback, and design deviations for an elderly care facility, Moments of Wayzata, at 163 Wayzata Boulevard West. Director Gellner, do we have a presentation this evening?
Yes, I'll begin the presentation, and then our consulting planner, Eric Swaber, will join me in the presentation as well.
Perfect, thank you.
The owner of the property is TMSC of Wayzata LLC, and the applicant is Jeff Schuler, present this evening. The project is located on Wayzata Boulevard West. It is east of Highway 12 and west of Ferndale Road. The property is currently zoned planned unit development, and it is guided high-density residential. Here's an aerial view of the property. You can see that it is located near Highway 12 with the Country Club and the City of Orono located to the west, Redeemer Lutheran Church and Wayzata Community Church located to the east, as well as the middle school, and single-family residences located to the south. Here's a street view of the property looking north from Wayzata Boulevard. There are several requests this evening that we will review. The first is the comprehensive plan amendment from high-density residential to the institutional and public land use designation. I would suggest that when we get into the discussion of this application, that we begin with that request first and work through them in this order here. The next is a zoning map amendment, which is also commonly called a rezoning from planned unit development to institutional. The third request is a conditional use permit for elderly care facility use in the institutional zoning district. The fourth is a variance to the side yard setback, which we will detail here in a moment, and then several design standard deviations, which we will also provide detail on for you this evening. I'll turn it over to Eric Swaber to describe the project in detail, and then I'll summarize at the end.
Thank you, Chair and Planning Commission. First, I'm going to review the previous business on this site. Back in 1993, this site was developed for a senior care alternative facility that was named Meridian Manor. That approval was a planned unit development rezoning. It allowed 75 units, but to serve up to 90 residents. It actually had two different height standards. The first was the height standard from the PUD, which is 35 feet or 3 stories. And the second height standard is it specifically stated that the sidewalk at the south elevation to the peak of the roof could be no more than 45 feet. So there were two measurements within that PUD. It included 52 off-street parking stalls, and it also included I guess for lack of a better word, a variance, that the unit sizes could be less than the code requirement. I'm going to preface or highlight something in that. In 2022, we did a number of updates to our zoning ordinance to implement our comprehensive plan, and there were a number of changes that will affect or be described in this. One was we noted that there were not senior unit sizes. It was just by bedrooms. So we adopted senior unit size requirements, and we'll address that later. But they had that variance because they were basically either studio or one-bedroom apartment sizes. Existing condition, this square footage is the footprint. There's a roughly 15,000 square foot footprint, 3-story building with a courtyard in the middle. Surface parking in the front or south of the building. Garages on the west side of the property, and the stormwater pond located on the north. Existing natural areas exist in the southeast and northern areas of the site. The site is just over 4 acres in size. Back in 2021, this same applicant came and received an approval from the city. There were 2 elements to that approval. It was a PUD amendment to that Meridian Manor PUD that would allow the renovation of the 3-story senior living and memory care facility to allow up to 84 dwelling units. And there was the design standard deviation to allow for parking in front of the building. Following that approval, the applicant attempted to work with the Minnesota Department of Health to get that renovation permitted, but the Department of Health, due to the changes in regulations, would not issue a building permit. So that's how we got to where we are today of the submittal for a new building. Here is the site plan. We'll go into more detail, but in general, parking in the front and in the back to the northwest, a outdoor recreation area to the northeast, and then a linear building in the middle of the site. This is a little bit more detail on the site plan. In brown, that is the new 2-story, roughly 31,000 square foot building. Would have 80 elderly care facility units. Has 62 parking stalls, both in the front for staff and visitors. The green area indicates the patio and garden recreational area. And then the area in purple there is an accessory building that would include outdoor kitchen, a cabana, and then storage, including the trash storage containers. And that's all enclosed. Setbacks. We're trying to show through the colors which are the setbacks, but the north setback, that's the middle diagram in red with the red line, that's over 200 feet. The south setback, which is on the right-hand side, that's 85 feet. The east setback is 50 feet and the west setback is 30 feet. You will note that for the institutional zoning district, the standards for all of those yards is a 50-foot setback, so they are requesting that variance to the west side setback to be down to 30 feet. Building height, the minimum or the maximum heights allowed in the institutional district is 3 stories or 40 feet. So note that is different than the PUD or a number of the commercial districts that we've worked in. It is 3 stories or 40 feet. The proposed building is 2 stories and 39 feet, 11 inches. This is again getting to the residential units and unit sizes. Meridian Manor had 75 units. Moments of Wayzata is proposing 80. The code, which again we changed back in 2022, says assisted living or memory care dwellings can have 330 square feet for units without kitchen facilities. All of their units do not have kitchen facilities, and their units range from 402 to 580 square feet in size. So they meet the requirement that we added for assisted living and memory care dwelling units. The outdoor recreation space, one of the 4 standards for the conditional use of elderly care facilities in institutional is that recreational space is located in the rear yard. So you see there, the northeast portion of the site is that over 10,000 square feet of garden, patio, and pathways. That is secured, so you have to get there from inside the building. The conditional use permit, they are proposing to rezone this property to institutional. Elderly care facilities, which includes assisted living and memory care, is only allowed within the city as a conditional use within the institutional zoning district. So that's the request for rezoning to institutional. The variance to the side yard setback, again, on the west side or on all sides, the code requirement for the side yard setback is 50 feet. They are proposing 30 feet on the west side. And in their narrative, they stated they're asking for that reduction because it's adjacent to Highway 12 and isn't impacting any immediate neighbors. So going into the design standard deviations, they are requesting to allow part of their parking to be located in the front yard. Again, the CUP standards for elderly care facilities require recreational areas in the rear yard, so placing all of the parking in the rear yard would really limit that outdoor recreational area. Again, the deviation is required to allow parking in the front yard. I will note that there are actually 2 sections of the design standard that have the same requirement of prohibiting front yard parking, so it's 2 sections of the code that are being deviated from, even though they both have the same requirement. Second design standard is building recesses. To start with, the code requires in all design standard districts that each building recess be at least 250 feet in area and at least 8 feet in depth. So areas 1 and area 4 happen to be 251 square feet in size. So area 1 and area 4 just are over that minimum recess area. And then areas 2 and 3 are about 440 square feet in area. We have 3 design districts. We have the Wayzata, the Lake Street, and the Bluff District. This is the Bluff District, but in the Wayzata Boulevard and the Lake Street districts, the code only requires building recesses every 100 feet of frontage. In the Bluff District, that's the only district that requires recesses every 50 feet. That's where the number 7 comes from. But, as you see here, there doesn't seem to be logical locations where an additional 3 building recesses could be located and maintain those building recesses to be 250 square feet in area. The next, this is the same variance, but this is just looking at the elevations and pointing where those recesses are located on the elevation to kind of understand what or how that interacts with the design of the building. The next design deviation is massing breaks. For this location, there should be a massing break that is 25 feet wide for the second story or above. So there isn't a required massing break on the first story, but for the second story and above, for every 150 feet in facade. This facade is over 300 feet, not yet 400 feet, but so that would require 2 massing breaks. The way they are proposing to achieve it is they want to maintain a transparent pedestrian walkway between essentially the 3, for lack of a better word, the 3 towers of that second floor to maintain the access for the residents. The area in orange is showed where there is no building in those areas, and then the area in green are those glazed breezeways that are simply the hallway to connect those 3 towers. Then there is a design deviation for unit entries. The design standard is for residential units on the ground level should have a secondary exterior entry. The proposal does not include those entries. And the reason the applicant stated is if they were included, those entries would remain permanently locked due to the safety needs of the proposed residents. The next variance is screening of sheet roofing. What this means is if you have a flat roof, the code requirement is to have a 3-foot parapet around that flat roof. It happens to be they are only proposing this in one location, which that location in green, that basically is between the numbers 8 and 9. So that's the area of the breezeway. They're trying to keep that breezeway as short as possible to try to keep that effect, the intent to keep visual ability to see through those 3 separate towers of that second floor. So a couple other standards that we need to discuss that are code requirements are lot coverage and floor area ratio. The maximum for institutional zoning of lot coverage is 40%. They are proposing 19.8. The comprehensive plan states that the maximum floor to area ratio, that's what the FAR stands for, the maximum floor area ratio is 1, and their proposal is 0.5. They are doing quite a bit of grading on this site. We've highlighted in green where the retaining walls are located. They range from 1.5 feet to 20 feet. We added these measurements to show that it is that far northwest corner by the parking lot is where there is a 20-foot retaining wall, and then kind of along that north edge of the parking lot and the recreation area breaks into 2 retaining walls that are 8 to 10 feet each. So they are proposing those retaining walls to allow for that parking area and that outdoor recreation area that is currently, a steep slope. I will with that state, this is not in the shoreline district, so we don't need to observe bluff or steep slope regulations that we would in the shoreline district. Due to this and the building excavation, they are actually proposing to change the average grade 3.55 feet. This city code requires that the city council approval for any alteration that results in more than 2 feet of average grade change. We wanted to point that out, but state that that in the city code is for the city council, so we don't need to have a planning commission recommendation on that. More than 2 feet of average grade change. So parking, the required parking would be 54 parking spaces for the 80 units. They are proposing 62. They are also providing all the ADA and loading spaces that are required as well. Tree preservation, there is currently 774 inches of trees that DBH is diameter at breast height. We'll just call it diameter from here, but 774 inches, diameter inches exist. They're removing 356. All the removals are significant trees. There is no heritage tree removal being proposed. And so the code standard is that 282.2 inches of replacement is required, and the applicant is proposing to install 522 inches of new trees. So not quite double, but pretty close to double the code requirement. Replacement trees will be spread throughout the site, and some are proposed in the landscaped area on the south side of Wayzata Boulevard between Wayzata Boulevard and Babcock Lane West. There is also, in addition to the trees that we discussed, additional landscaping of shrubs, which are generally shown in green, and then some other grasses, which are shown in orange. So in addition to just the trees, they are planning an extensive landscape to the site as well. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Community Development Director Gellner.
Thank you. So notification of the comprehensive plan amendment was sent to the City of Orono and the City of Plymouth on April 2nd, 2024. We did not receive any concerns from either city. This publication of this hearing was published in the Sun Sailor on April 11th, and then a notice was sent to property owners and renters within 500 feet of the property as well. The neighborhood meeting was on February 5th, and there were 15 people in attendance. Topics of discussion included headlight glare concerns, concerns about the east property line and improvements being made in that area in coordination with the church to the east. There was discussion of the site entry and exit points, the parking configuration, the design deviations, and the site lighting. One letter has been received from a group of neighbors to the south. The neighbors note concerns in their letter that include tree preservation, light pollution, the architectural design, the number of design deviations, and the property condition since 2021. Just wanted to acknowledge here that in 2023, there were property maintenance violations for this property. They were addressed by the property owner. They included long grass and weeds, storage of concrete barriers, construction trailers, storage containers, and construction equipment, as well as excessive animal waste on the property. And all those items have been addressed through a separate process from the process that we are addressing here tonight. The city engineer has commented that the earthwork calculations are provided in the grading plan, and they show that that average grade is proposed to change by 3.55 feet in total as an average, requiring that city council approval. That was our only comment from the city engineer on this project. Now I'd like to point out the questions to consider. All of these are located on page 33 of your agenda packet, And I suggest as you do get into the discussion this evening that you begin with the comprehensive plan amendment and then work through the different requests in this order. And so first, speaking to the comprehensive plan amendment, we'd like to ask that the commission consider whether this proposed use is consistent with the drivers and goals and policies of the comprehensive plan to re-guide to the institutional public guidance, and is this proposed use meeting the goals and policies of our institutional and public land use category? And then second, if the commission finds that this is a true statement, I suggest then talking about the zoning map amendment, which is a similar conversation. Does the proposed area conform with the present and future land uses of the area? And then does the proposed use conform to all the performance standards of the applicable district? And then after speaking about the zoning map amendment, I recommend discussing the conditional use permit for the elderly care facility. There's standards located on 33 and then 35 through 36 of your agenda packet. The first question there is, does this proposed use conform with the present and future land uses of the area, similar to the last one? Does the proposed use conform to applicable performance standards? And then is the rear yard used only for recreational areas? And is it fenced, controlled, and screened in compliance with Chapter 918, which is our fencing and screening standards? And then for the variance, I recommend you then talk about that as the fourth request. Is the property owner's proposal for the west side yard setback, or is that reasonable, just not permitted by the ordinance? Is it due to the plight of the landowner that's not due to circumstances that are unique to the property? Will the variance, if granted, alter the essential character of the locality? Has the applicant established a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance? And is the proposal in harmony with our comprehensive plan and the general intent of the zoning ordinance? And then lastly, I suggest you discuss the design deviations after you discuss those previous four, just because really that institutional zoning and comp plan amendment are really crucial and key to this application. So then after discussing that, I suggest you discuss these design deviations. There are several. All the criteria are the same for each of the design deviations. We do need to make findings on each of those individually tonight. Does the proposed design contribute to the improvement of the city's public realm? And then is the negative impact caused by each of these design deviations outweighing any of the following positives? And I just want to point out this list, and this is also located on page 37 through 42 of your agenda packets. And what we're looking for are factors such as the extent to which the project advances specific policies and provisions of the city's comprehensive plan, the extent to which the design deviations permit greater conformity with other standards, the guidance of the design standards or policies and other standards in the zoning ordinance. We're looking for whether any design deviations have positive effect on the area and on the project where it's proposed, if they alleviate an undue burden, taking into account current leasing, housing, and commercial conditions, whether this accommodation of future possible uses is contemplated in our zoning ordinance or comprehensive plan, if there's any local historic designation, or if the project is remodeling an existing building. And those are located more specifically on page 42. Now, for next steps, we'd like to answer any clarifying questions that the commission has and then move into the applicant presentation. At that point, then, if there's any questions from the commission to the applicant, that would be a great time for that. And then any remaining questions that could be directed to staff. Then we'll conduct the public hearing. There may be some comments or questions during the public hearing that the chair would like to ask of staff at that point. And then it's just time for discussion and deliberation at that point. So with that, I'll just show you what the action steps are, and then we can get into any questions. After you consider the items that are outlined in this report and hold the public hearing, discuss the requests, the Planning Commission should direct staff to prepare a draft Planning Commission report and recommendation with appropriate findings reflecting a recommendation on the application, each of the requests specifically for review and adoption at our next Planning Commission meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Gellner and Planners Weber and staff. At this time, Commissioners, do we have any questions for staff for clarifying?
I have one.
Yep.
Do we know regarding the elevation of the front parking lots, the elevation in the proposal here versus existing? Do we know if it's, I guess that's the question.
Yes, we do. I think it'll take us a moment to look at plan sheets to compare the grading that's existing to the proposed grading. So if we could just have a moment to look that one up, we can give you those figures. Okay, yeah. Why don't we write that one down, and that'll take us a moment, maybe perhaps while the applicant's presenting, we could look for the numbers, Commissioner, just because they're small, we gotta take a look.
That's a good question. While we're looking for that, can I invite the applicant up to speak, or would you need a minute to pause on that?
Tara had a couple questions, if you don't
Oh,
mind.
sorry,
Yeah, no,
I missed you.
That's all right. Well, while you're looking up that, can you also confirm the location and layout of the parking and how it differs? Because it looked like there was maybe parking on both sides of the entrance in the presentation. And I also wanted to confirm the height. So in the application, it looked like it's a 2-story building from the front, but on the rear, it looks like it's 3 stories. So that's different from the current building, correct? Because it looks like I think the current building is 3 stories from both the front and the back. So can you confirm that?
Do you want to take the height one first?
Can we go to,
Yes.
okay, so maybe this one can address both because we have, well, this is the front elevation. You can see the bottom line, that is the bottom of the lower level. So this is facing south. Facing north, you would see down to that bottom dotted line. And you see that's about 14 feet lower than the south elevation. The line between the two is the average grade plane. So what we do is we require people to measure the lowest point adjacent to the building foundation at every 50 feet. And so there's a number of points on the south side where it is that first floor elevation is the point, and then the ones in the back. So the result is that you would get that average grade plane, which is about 8 feet, 8 inches or so below the first floor elevation. So the average grade plane is more than 8 feet below the average grade. The code is then you take the highest gable and you take the average point of that highest gable. So the highest gable is that gable over that portraiture, in the front facing the south. So the point of that is the line that's just below 4. And so from the average grade plane to that line, which is the average point of that gable, is 39 feet 10, and it's almost 11 inches. So it's 39 feet 11 inches. Did that answer the height question?
Yeah, and then, so looking at the building from the front, so Wayzata Boulevard, it looks like it's 2 stories.
Yes.
But then from the back, it's 3?
That's
So they
correct.
have it's like a walkout.
Yep. So the city code says that any lower level that has an exposed foundation of at least 6 feet for more than 50% of the foundation, so it has to be 6 feet or lower for 50% of the entire foundation, then that counts as a story.
Okay.
This is less than 50%
Okay.
of that. So that's why it's not a story by our code, but if you were looking from the north, which really only people from the building would look, you would see the lower level, the upper level.
So there's basically 3 levels in the building.
There are 3 levels, but by code, only 2 stories.
Got it, okay. And then, and maybe the applicant can speak to this, but I'm curious about the tree plan for the front of the building along both Wayzata Boulevard, and then you mentioned Babcock Lane. Does that mean that they're going to take trees across the street in that buffer between the two, or are they just?
They're not removing any trees.
No, but they're
Planning on
adding?
installing trees
Okay.
in that buffer.
Okay. And do you know where?
Yes, and I can tell you what page in the packet here in 1 second. It is on page 58 of the packet. The plan sheet is L 1.0, and then if we go to the very south, where you get across Wayzata Boulevard,
Okay, there it is.
you see there, they took a look at where the existing trees are and are proposing to install new trees essentially in those gaps.
Okay, thank you.
I believe you had a parking lot configuration question as well.
Looks like this is answered, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So Chair, I think while the applicant is doing their presentation, we can look up those grading,
Got
those
it.
elevation numbers.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite the applicant to come forward and address the commission. Please state your name and address for the record and your role if you're an advisor or other part of the applicant's team. And if you can kindly keep your presentation to 10 minutes or as close as possible, that would help us stay on schedule. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Schuler. I'm the applicant, 3953 Regent Ave in Robbinsdale.
I think his mic is up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure your mic is on. It should show a green light. There you go. If you could start from the beginning again,
Sure.
thank you.
My name is Jeff Schuler. I'm the applicant, 3953 Regent Ave in Robbinsdale. I'm functioning as the owner's rep and lead architect on the project.
Elizabeth Wright, 13564 Westerness Road, Minnetonka. I am the owner of TMSC of Wayzata, in the Moments of Wayzata.
So we wanted to briefly walk through, the staff did a great job on introducing the project, and so what we really wanted to touch on were the design deviations and why we think it enhances the site along with the building. So we made a big attempt. The feel of this area of town, especially communicated by the neighbors, is a residential feel, even with it being guided as high-density residential or an existing senior living. So we tried to incorporate residential parts to a building that was always going to be larger than a single-family residence, using slope roofs, different types of siding. I know the kind of current design trend in Wayzata, there's a lot of white and light finishes, and that's what we tried to follow in the design. So these are just some of the houses around Wayzata that are all within a few blocks of, well, maybe a couple more, but all part of Wayzata that we used as guidance on the design of our building. I know that the tree preservation is very important to the city in general and the neighbors, and we've done our best to save all the trees as many trees as we can on the south side of the property, being that that's what the general public will still be able to enjoy. Most of these trees, no matter just about any redevelopment, will need to be removed just based on demolishing the building as it is, let alone the new design. One of the things we looked at from our previous go-around with this project was the trees being a major factor for the neighbors. And so as we were laying out the site, one thing that we talked about internally is that by moving all of the parking to the back of the building, in order to get enough space for both the required amount of parking stalls and the recreation area, we would need to pull the building as far forward as the setbacks would allow. And being that we have a deeper building going down 14 feet from grade at the south side, the excavation of that building would end up impacting much more trees rather than leaving the parking that's already in that location as a buffer between the construction to save and protect those trees along the southern border. And this photo was taken about 2 weeks ago after dark with an SUV parked in the existing parking stalls facing Babcock, showing that right now, as it is, trees with almost no leaves, the grade the grade of Wayzata Boulevard blocks a lot of the headlights, and you don't actually receive direct light from the headlights. And in our proposal, we have much more bushes and other ways to obscure those lights, so it will only get better from here. We also, in that parking, we've laid it out so that we have enough parking for all of the staff at the non-peak times to park in the back. So all the movement and activity on this site by cars, the majority of it will be behind the building. And this is not a building that will see, none of the residents own cars, so there'll be fewer cars, and then all of the visiting cars going in and out are really not there after 8 or 9, maybe 10. And so these lights, really, we don't think will have a major impact on the neighbors. This is looking at the existing screening and trees. There's quite a bit once the trees are in the summer, once all the leaves are on the trees, where it is difficult to see the building as it is. And it will continue to be so because all of those trees along Wayzata Boulevard will be saved and preserved. This is talking about the building recesses. The goal, as I understand it, is to make sure that we don't end up, that the city of Wayzata doesn't end up with a large monolithic building. And I think that's a hard subjective goal or a hard goal to quantify in codes. And so my interpretation is that with the amount of recesses, there's an attempt to quantify something that's a little more subjective. And so what we've done is try to meet the intent of that by breaking up the building, not letting it be just straight walls. We also have something that's not necessary, that the code doesn't allow for inclusion in this, but it's the porte cochere on the front. From grade, that looks like a flat plane, but as you can see in elevation and in 3D, that porte cochere comes out and helps break up that design even more, even though it's not able to be quantified in the code. Oh, sorry. So you can click a couple times. It'll go through and just highlight all the different areas. Those two are the recesses that meet the code guideline. There's going to be quite a few clicks here, Emily, if you want to just keep moving. We have bump outs coming out to break it up. The building in multiple places on this elevation steps back to help break that up. We have the massing breaks that we'll talk more about here in a couple minutes, where the building is broken up. And then, like I said, that porte cochere that is not necessarily quantified in the code to go for the recesses, but it does have an impact. And then the last big impact design deviation that we're looking for is with the massing breaks. We understand why this is in the code, to try to break up so we don't end up with, once again, a monolithic building. But that does put quite a heavy burden on staff and residents of a facility that have a hard time navigating their home in general, let alone if residents were sequestered in individual towers of this building. They're not capable of using elevators on their own, so any movement to get down to eat in the morning, to the salon, to any of their activities would then need to be guided by a nurse and have quite a large staffing contingent just for the movement across what will end up being 3 towers. We took guidance here from the Wells Fargo property that was recently approved. They did almost the exact same thing with a transparent walkway to help bridge those towers and achieve the massing breaks while still being accessible to residents on those floors. And then I believe this will be the final one. The individual exterior unit doors. In a community like this, all of those doors, like we said earlier, would be locked. Not only would they be locked, but they would be a big distraction and hazard to residents who can't remember that door doesn't work and won't work. So they'll end up being quite frustrated by a locked door in their living room. And I don't believe that in this area, which is not quite as walkable as the rest of Wayzata, that a door facing the public way in each of these units adds to the exterior character, and I know it has a large detrimental effect on residents who would live here. Oh, and then finally, the parapet height. In this area of Wayzata, we're not allowed to have any rooftop equipment, and there's none provided. So any screening, there's nothing for the 3-foot parapet to screen necessarily, especially since there will be almost no neighbor unless the church is demolished and replaced. There'll be no neighbor who will be tall enough to see the roof of this building. I think, yeah, that's just our closing slide.
Thank you.
Would you like us to stay up here or sit?
Yes, please, if commissioners have any questions for the applicant, yes.
I have-
Commissioner Douglas.
Regarding parking, because that's been a concern, I know the residents of Headlights. The only in the southwest corner of the lot, the only ones seem to be facing Wayzata Boulevard or what's already there.
Correct.
Okay. And we're going to get the grade on that, but I also have a large SUV and I kind of tested it out, but I'd be interested in hearing the grade changes there. So the new then faces the building, the headlights will face the building on the
Yes.
southeast side.
Any additional parking in the front of the building, as far as stalls, face the building.
Okay, thank you.
So this image you have here shows the front looking very sort of flat and level, but in actual build, it would be sloped, right? Because that's
Yes, this rendering is prepared by the architect, really highlighting the building, not necessarily
okay.
the lot.
Yeah, just clarifying, thank you. Do you have any more follow-up questions for? Yes? Commissioner Planton? Oh, mic challenges.
There we go.
There we
Yeah.
go.
I have a question on the number of stalls. So you're only required to have 54, and you're proposing 64? Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you explain the reason for that, 10 more?
There are times when maybe you want to speak about events there?
Sure. So we do actually, first of all, we have the Moments of Lakeville, which is when I say we do, I'm speaking about the current and existing community and what we've been doing in the past down there. We do have, we try to have robust staffing to begin with, and there are times where you're going to have significant number of people coming in and leaving at shift change. So in order to accommodate that, we need to have that type of parking. The other part of this is that, we like to invite the families and the neighbors and really like to have people once in a while, not a great deal, but once in a while come to the community and see what we're doing. And we like to have volunteers if we can find them, which any one of you would be wonderful, hopefully. And we love that side of being a part of the community as a larger fixture. So, and I tend to remember, I think a number of years ago, J.J. Hill used to host some dog pet contest up there in the parking lot. So that would be kind of fun as far as I'm concerned. But anyways, that's the answer to your question. We have robust staffing, and we want to make sure there's enough parking spaces for that and for families to come and visit. We don't hide. We're a beautiful building inside and out. We've got cleanliness like no other, and we want our families to come when they want to.
And a follow-up question to that, following Commissioner Douglas. So the existing number of stalls currently in the front, 42, and you're proposing 44. So just two more?
That sounds right. If we look at the plan, I
Okay.
could verify, but yes, the plan has always been to keep, not to add many more or any more to the front. And like I said, we've removed some of the ones facing Wayzata Boulevard and moved them to face the building.
And that was the 10 we were referring to that face the building?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that's distinct from the current site, where the current site doesn't have back parking, does it? No,
No, there's no parking in the rear yard.
right? So functionally, I don't know if you can pull up that parking slide again, that one was titled parking. You've got more visitor and staff in the front and sort of waste management and of that kind of, function of your facility happening in the back?
So it will be mandated by staff that if there's an available spot in the rear, that's where they need to park. That's where most of the traffic for this building will be. We've also moved the loading dock, so that now faces any truck that comes in, that will face south, whereas right now it faces, the new plan, it will face north. Right now it faces southwest, so that will remove any semi-trucks sitting. And then the front yard would be for visitors and overflow, which is less frequent than the staff.
Thank you.
And if I may, just so, when we designed this, we actually also designed the employee entrance off that kind of rear west side. So they'll be going in that rear west side, and I haven't met a staff member who doesn't want to park as close to the door as possible, especially in winter.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any other questions of the applicant at this time? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. Okay.
We can answer that question that was
Oh, wonderful.
previously asked. So I'll turn it over to Eric for those numbers.
First, well, I'm going to repeat the questions, make sure I'm getting the right answers. But first, I think I heard from Sorensen, you were asking what is the height from the sidewalk to the peak of the roof in the existing building and the same in the proposed? Is that correct?
What I was curious about is how the elevations of the new parking, how that compares to the existing parking now.
Yep.
And I know it's not
Okay.
flat, so it slopes, but in general, how would you describe
Right.
the elevations of new versus existing front parking?
Well, to start with, the point where the front door is, the sidewalk there currently is the elevation 998.9, and their proposal is 1001.5. So essentially, the elevation of the front door would be 2.6 feet taller than what it is today. So that's the start, kind of. To speak generally of the whole site, so the two entrances to the parking lot are in the same location they are now. So just to talk about basically the curb line, north curb line of Wayzata Boulevard West. It is about the 998 elevation on the west side, and on the east side, it is almost 104. And those are staying the same. That west curb line of Wayzata Boulevard is the same as what it is today. So in kind of ignoring those west parking stalls that are adjacent to Highway 12, if we look at that southwest corner of the parking lot, that is the existing parking lot. So it is the same as it is today of 998.5. So essentially that corner of southwest corner of the parking lot and the curb of Wayzata Boulevard is about equal. You know, there's not any grade between the parking lot and Wayzata Boulevard at that location. Okay? So the current proposal is that where the curve of that parking lot, so essentially the south side of the parking lot where that far eastern parking stall is, that, you know, fronts to the building, that is the 1002 elevation. So that southern curb line is 1 foot below the current Wayzata Boulevard elevation. And when you actually get to the northern curb line, which is that parking lot, it's actually 1,000. So there's a 2 foot grade drop. You know, basically the driveway slopes from the south curb line to the north curb line. So when you are parked in that stall, you are more than 3 feet below the curb line of Wayzata Boulevard today.
And how does that compare to the existing parking lot now?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Because I do have the measurement again at the front entrance, that's about 2.6 feet higher. The northwest corner of the parking lot, that's where it is today, so it's the same. Let me look up the northeast corner of that parking lot.
I think we're trying to get a feel for right?
Yeah, Eric, maybe what I'm asking isn't easily determined without going through the process you're going through, but.
Yeah,
I mean,
so,
generally, the parking in front, compared to what it is now versus the new plan?
if we look at the east side of the existing plan, we're at the 1,000-foot elevation. So the proposed parking elevation and the existing curve that's there today is the same elevation.
Okay.
So it's just the portraiture is 2.6 feet higher than the current front door. But the parking lot is the same elevations as today.
Okay.
Can you repeat that? You said the porte cochere is going to be at the same elevation as, so that's the second floor? Porte
That's
cochere will be the same location as the current front door on the main level?
The sidewalk under the portraiture, right where the sidewalk and the front door is, that currently is 2.6 feet below the front door of the proposal. But the north curb line of this parking lot and the north curb line of the existing parking lot are, tens of, decimal points of a feet
Okay,
off.
thank you, thank you.
I think it's the same.
We think it's more or less going to feel similar to what it is now. Granted, there's a lot of measurements and technicalities, but it's not like we're going to see the parking lot suddenly be street level or something like this.
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
okay.
Thank you.
Okay,
And
Right.
if I could, it was one of the questions you asked the applicant, but again, ignoring the west parking that faces Highway 12, the parking in front of the building, there are currently 31 stalls in front of the building. There's proposed to be 35. So there's 4 more proposed in front of the building.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. It's very helpful. I think now we can turn to the public hearing if there's no more questions to follow up with. Yeah? Okay, great. So the public hearing is a time for us to listen to you, our community, about the approval requests we're considering this evening, and it's an important part of the process that allows the public to participate. Questions asked during the public hearing will be held until the end of the hearing and may be addressed by staff at that point. Our goal is to make a well-informed and grounded recommendation to the City Council about this application and this applicant's request. In an effort towards clarity and efficiency, it's very important to reiterate a point that someone else has made, but not at great length if it's already been dictated in detail. We do appreciate new perspectives. All of us here have had the opportunity to read all the comments that were submitted as well as the application. Members are welcome to have an opportunity to speak at the microphone, and if you can please keep your comments up to 3 minutes, that would be helpful. If you are not comfortable speaking tonight for any reason or have more comments to after, this is not the only time you can submit your comments. You can also submit them to the city prior to the City Council's consideration of the application and also attend that meeting. With that said, I'm now going to open the public hearing. I'm going to try to get the title of the application somewhere in my notes. The public hearing for consideration of the development application for comprehensive plan amendment, zoning map amendment, conditional use permit, variance to the west side yard setback, and design deviations for an elderly care facility, Moments of Wayzata, at 163 Wayzata Boulevard West. Great. Would anyone like to come and ask make some public comment this evening? Please.
Good evening. My name is Mike Sund, and I live at 136 Babcock Lane in Wayzata. So I'm right across the street from the old Meridian Manor. We've been there 26 years, so obviously we love it here in Wayzata. And I think that we all understand that this is really a special place, right? I would say that it's special not by accident. Some of the reasons it's special is because of the zoning and the design guidelines and people like you on the Planning Commission who've enforced some of the rules that we have for all of the new developments. For example, take Folkestone, which is very compliant with the look and feel and character of the city. Another is the new development at Wells Fargo. And if you even go back as far as, 15 years ago when Chipotle and Punch was built, with all the parking behind the building and the building pushed closer to the street. All of that, all three that I mentioned kind of have a good look and feel and aren't dominated by automobile traffic and parking. Now we're considering a number of deviations, 5, 6, I'm not sure how many, from some of our rules and regulations. And not only do those diminish some of the value or potentially the value of the neighborhood adjacent to the development, but I would say because of the location on the western gateway to Wayzata, it has an impact on the way people approaching our city feel about the town. When we see something that has sort of a monolithic look, and I know the architects have tried to avoid that, but still, with the parking out in front, it feels more like a motel than a more current development, some of the others that I've mentioned. So I think that affects all of Wayzata, right? It has that kind of impact. First impressions matter, and it has that kind of impact on those visitors. So I think the ask that we have tonight is simple, straightforward. It's just to enforce the rules, right? And if that means going back to the drawing board, so be it. But thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other members of the public who wish to speak tonight? Please.
Good evening. My name is Ken Wilcox, 178 Westwood Lane. I'd like to, first of all, thank the commission for all your hard work. This is not an easy job, and there are no black and white answers. It's what shade of gray you come down on, and it makes it pretty tough. Just to piggyback on what Mike just said about the special place, a little bit of history, sort of before my time, but my understanding was that property, and maybe Peggy has some of that history stories too, but it used to be a community garden of some sort. And so when Meridian Manor came along, there was a lot of pressure put on them to fit into what was basically a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. Nobody wanted the garden to go away, but they wanted to make sure that whatever did come in there would fit into that residential neighborhood. And I'd say that's still the case today. Meridian Manor has been a really important building over time. I know when this building was being constructed, the city council held meetings at Meridian Manor. So it's always been part of the community and an active part. So whatever we put in there has to adhere to that kind of history and feel. And that's subjective, and it's hard to accomplish, but I think we need to keep that in mind as you deliberate. What you do have is a solid building going across, and I know the architects made some efforts to articulate it. My own opinion is white in a long building like that is going to be a bit of a spotlight into the neighborhood. The city has deliberated over color for a long time. Dark colors tend to recede. White colors are more in your face, but white colors are also more kind of holiday lakeshore kind of thing. So light colors made more sense down by the lake, but up here you want it to recede. And I don't know if design standards on materials apply up here or not, where brick and stone and that kind of thing are specified. But one of the reasons that Meridian Manor looks the way it does is the brick and the white trim. I mean, it looks very residential. This does not look residential. And so I think some effort with materials and color could help. And so that's one thought. Moving on in terms of variances, variances used to be really tough to get. It used to have to demonstrate an undue hardship not caused by you. And so that was then eased up, and practical difficulty became the new standard. But still, it's always struck me that if you have a clean slate, and the old Meridian Manor will go away, you can put anything on that you want, and there isn't really any excuse for needing a variance. I mean, because you can just design it. There's nothing there that's preventing you from adhering to the underlying zoning. So I would be against any variance for that reason. And finally, in terms of rezoning, it sort of makes sense to make this industrial, or non-industrial, institutional. But it's a PUD right now, and you could change it to a new PUD. You'd have more control over what happens. It seems to me that the redesignation to institutional is allowing them a little bit more height, and I don't think you want more height in this area. So I would give that some serious thought about whether You just want to rezone it to another PUD, which gives you more control over the design elements. And I think that's all I've got. But thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members of the public? Yes, please. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joe Van Loy. I live at 136 Birch Lane West. Been a resident for 24 years. To mirror what Ken said, my question about rezoning is the applicant indicated many of the things that they believed would be of value if we rezoned. I'm not sure that we have taken, I haven't seen, let's say, that the staff has taken up to see whether or not we think it's of value. We worked on the comprehensive plan for a very long time, put a lot of money and effort into it to come up with a zone. I think we should make sure that we are making the right choices. It might be the right choice, I'm just not sure. Second of all, this building as proposed is 355 feet, if I read correctly. That's a football field with the end zones. And so if you think about how big that is and how it's very linear because of the use, you have to picture what that would look like on this site. And when you compare the maps of Meridian versus this, you can see how this goes way to the edges. So I just want to make sure that we're thinking about what that impact would be in our face. And then finally, to the last point, right, we've worked very hard in Wayzata to not be looking at parking lots. And if we're starting from scratch, there should be a way to find a way to either put it more behind or put it underneath, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comments. I think we have someone coming.
I agree. My name is Daniel Drotning. I'm the new kid here. I've only been in Wayzata 36 years. So I live at 120 Westwood Lane, right across the street from the exit that this building will create. So rather than going over the same things, a couple of things I was hoping that you guys consider is site lighting. Past lives, I worked for Super Value and built grocery stores for them as part of a team. And it is very easy to make a difficult mistake, and all of a sudden, the site lighting has a great impact on your neighbor. And I would hope that the people building it, and I'm for this being a property being developed. I've lived across the street from it long enough to see gutters hanging down to the ground, and what had been a farm and used to have bees when my wife and I bought our property certainly doesn't any longer. So nobody in Wayzata likes seeing property go undeveloped. That's not a positive thing for the city at all. And I think we all understand that. But you have to, the devil's in the details sometimes. So I know you're doing a great job, and I appreciate that, but continue to do that, but continue to watch for the devils in the details. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jane Wallace, and I'm at 118 Babcock Lane, so I'm with many of the neighbors here. My husband and I purchased our home in the Highlands neighborhood across from Meridian Manor about 9 years ago. When we moved here, we actually didn't know Wayzata was a town. So we fell in love with the charm of this little town that we happened into, and became very attracted to start our family here. We were very interested in purchasing where we did in our neighborhood because it was family friendly, and because it really appealed to it really appealed to us. My concern with the proposed plan is the same as, is very similar to my neighbors, in that the proposed plan does lack the charm and character that attracted me to Wayzata in the first place. I think something that is missing that is really important here is that this is not just an entrance to our neighborhood or maybe, a potentially corporate-looking business in our neighborhood. It is also the west entrance to the town of Wayzata, and I don't think it represents us well. I worked for a high-end residential living facility, senior living facility in Arizona, and when we were building that facility, it was required that we had to adhere to very strict guidelines that were necessary for North Scottsdale. Some of those included just having 2 levels so that you could see the mountains. Some of those restrictions included having less of a dense population, maintaining desert wildlife, and all of those restrictions were adhered to, and we complied with them because we wanted to be a good neighbor. My concern is that so far, the applicants just have not demonstrated that they're willing to be a good neighbor. I haven't seen that the plans match the look and the feel of our community. And the property's been neglected, frankly, over the past few years. So I'm hoping that a rejection here may bring us all to the table so that we can have a plan that works for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here tonight that would like to speak? Director Gellner, do we have anybody on Zoom?
We do not, Chair.
Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission for discussion. Commissioners, do we have any questions of staff or the applicant at this point, or anything that was raised during the public hearing? Yeah, Commissioner Douglas?
My question is for staff. When the applicant came to you, was there any discussion about keeping a PUD there?
There was, Chair and Commission. We discussed the option of changing rezoning from the current PUD, which is specifically for Meridian Manor and the way Meridian Manor was designed and used, to a new PUD. That process is a 2-part process, requires a concept plan approval and a general plan approval. It typically takes about twice as long to get through the entitlement process as a rezoning to another zoning district. So that was one consideration, was the amount of time. Another consideration was that we do look for opportunities to find a solution for entitlements that does not require a PUD. A PUD is used when the typical zoning does not really allow for that use, doesn't allow for that design. So the applicant was charged with looking at whether they could find a solution within our zoning ordinance. The institutional designation and zoning district are very appropriate for memory care. In our comprehensive plan and zoning code, we both list like nursing homes and elder care facilities as being a match for institutional use. There's also institutional parcels directly to the east of this property. So it was an option, but ultimately the applicant did note that they were interested in the 40-foot height limit as well that is offered in the institutional district. The height limit in our planned unit development district is 35 feet. And so that was a consideration. The applicant was generally looking at fairly large setbacks, considering other parts of town have pretty small setbacks. Our institutional district does have 50-foot setbacks in every direction. However, early on, they identified that they would need to apply for a variance. So that was part of their consideration early on. So I can see that there's a path to do a planned unit development. The applicant noted that in their narrative to this application that they were concerned that a planned unit development also requires the dedication of public space, and that this use wasn't very, conducive to dedicating land for public use or dedicating a fee in lieu. So that wasn't something we necessarily discussed early on, but it's something that they had considered as well. So ultimately, though, tonight we are focused on exactly what they have applied for this evening. So even though a PUD is an idea, that we won't end up making that as a finding, I'll suggest.
I was just interested in the history of the application and some of the discussions, how this came about. Thank you.
Any other questions, commissioners? All right, if not, I can open up to our discussion amongst one another on this application, which is very complicated and has multiple steps. I do agree with the order recommended by staff because variance and design deviations sort of fall secondary to whether or not we believe that this application should be we should be approving the comprehensive plan amendment and zoning amendment. So maybe we can start with some thoughts from commissioners after what we've heard, what we've read, and all of our questions on the comprehensive plan amendment itself, and whether or not, the primary questions we have to consider in front of us are, is the proposed unit consistent with the driver's goals and policies of the comp plan? And is the proposed use consistent with the goals and policies of institutional public land use category? Anybody interested in opening the conversation? Commissioner Douglas.
In looking over the comprehensive plan, and I've been involved in that process, one of the goals of our community is to support multi-generational community and to provide housing for people of all ages. And part of that was to allow people, as people age, there are opportunities so that younger people can move into homes. It's kind of that process. And I like that part of this amendment. Right now, under the comprehensive plan, there's an allowance for 12 to 40 units per acre. If someone wanted to come in and build a building, that would be 48 to 160 units. That's a 4-acre parcel. I was thinking about even at 48 units, that's twice the size of Meyer Place on Lake Street, when you think about that. And so I can support senior living. I think it's an important part of our community. And after reading the statistics on memory care, that a third of the people over 90 will have dementia, I went, wow. If we all live that long, just think of that in our society. But anyway, I could support the comp plan amendment.
Thank you, Commissioner Douglas.
Welcome.
Commissioner Severson, did you have?
Yeah, I like the idea of having senior living there. I think Meridian Manor was a great addition to the neighborhood. I'm not so sure I'm ready to move it to institutional, though. But at the same time, the opposite of that is if you, like you said, Commissioner Douglas, you could have 100 residents or 100 units across the street there. And so I'd rather not see that, but at the same time, I don't know how I feel about moving it to institutional. And I agree with some of the things that the neighbors have said around parking, parking in the front, and they had a clean slate. They're tearing down that building. It wasn't viable. And so to come back and ask for a whole lot of variances when you have a clean slate, I'm not super comfortable at this point doing.
Yeah, I can jump in. I'd like to thank the applicant for coming and making this proposal. We need more facilities like this. I think we've all been touched by memory care, and we all will be. So I do, as Commissioner Douglas mentioned, love the idea of multi-generational housing and letting us age in place. I would support a change in the comprehensive plan to institutional. The properties adjacent to it are. I do think it supports also the safety of the residents in that institution by allowing a few things like having recreational areas in the back. Without other options, I would really hate to see it be high-density housing. We've struggled with that in this community, and we still struggle with that, and so I think this is a way to get institutional designation adjacent to institutional designation.
Thank you, Commissioner Planton.
I'm very much aligned with Commissioner Douglas and Planton on their comments, especially when you think about if this site were developed in a high-density residential format, and the number of people that would live there, the burden on the schools and traffic and congestion would be significantly different than the number of people that we're going to see here in this facility. So I could support the amendment to institutional. I have the same thoughts about, it's kind of a unique site because you have housing on the south, and you've got institutional on the east with a school and with the church, and you have some public space, and then you got the highway on the west and the golf course. So it seems to be institutional seems to be an appropriate use of this site considering what's around it.
Yeah. I'm in alignment with the comments you just made on the same point. I'm not going to repeat them all. I will say that to Commissioner Severson's point about the variances that then follow, I'm hearing you, but I'm hearing them. I'm trying to sort of look at them distinct from that. And so, just with the sort of the logic and all the points made by my fellow commissioners, I would also be in support of moving towards the institutional comp plan amendment.
Chair, I have a question. May I ask of staff? Have we made any amendments to the comprehensive plan to date?
We have made a few comprehensive plan amendments, and the last one that we did was actually for another memory care facility, and that was called Cantissimo Senior Living. It changed its name to Harbors of Wayzata. It's on the far eastern side of Wayzata Boulevard, on the frontage road there, and so that was changed to the institutional guidance as well. Yeah, for similar kind of context, it was near institutional and residential parcels as well.
And was that also high density, or what would it change from?
That one was actually a single-family
Oh, okay.
residential area.
And what year was that?
The re-guiding,
Yeah.
it was actually just in 2023. It was kind of spanning a few years, though. It was starting to occur in 2022 as well.
Okay. Well, that's sort of that. I'm going to move on to the zoning map amendment. There's 2 points that we're looking at here. Does the proposed use conform with present and future land use of the area? And does the proposed use conform with all performance standards of the applicable district? And I think if we go back to
Page 14. Is that what you're looking for?
yeah. Yeah, so there's page 36 of our packet, had some guidance on that, and page,
It's in front of us.
oh, there we go. Thank you. That's much easier.
So Chair, I can just note that Staff has analyzed this information and found that it generally meets performance standards with the exception, of course, of the variance that's being requested. So we don't need a parking variance. All other performance standards are met besides the variance in the west side yard. So really, we could consider that as you discuss that specifically. But if you feel that's completely linked to this zoning map amendment, we can discuss that with Attorney Schulzel if you have any questions.
Chair, and I just wanted to point out that the list of standards when you consider rezoning is on page, at least in my PDF, 35.
Yeah.
I think staff's highlighting a couple of those standards, performance standards, which is very important, of course, and their analysis plays into that. But you're really charged with thinking about the possible adverse effects of that rezoning. And there's 7 criteria there for you to look at.
Present and future land uses.
Well, I mean, we talked a bit about the parking, right? And we had approved the previous proposal with the parking in the front, and we've discussed the level of the parking. So I feel like we've kind of, and also the functionality, which I think was really important, that this proposal, unlike the last one, really moves the garbage was a big hang-up in the past. And, you know, makes a lot of sense why there was a lot of thought about the rubbish and the noise associated with it, but now that's kind of in the back of the building, which is a nice change, and I think a positive. And the front is more for, and the front parking is used more for your visitors, and as well, the applicant did state that the staff would be directed to park in the back where there was room, so all those things make me feel more comfortable about the parking aspect. As well as the additional stalls being facing north, right? From a headlight point of view. Anyone else have any thoughts on this aspect? Yeah, Commissioner.
So Chair, just on the zoning map amendment, you know, I guess I would be inclined to support the amendment, given the criteria of conforming with the present and future land uses of the area, and hearing staff's comment about compliance with the performance standards, and I think some of the other issues we're getting into, maybe we'll discuss in variances and that type of thing.
Yep. Commissioner Planton?
Yep, I agree with Commissioner Sorensen.
I agree.
Severson? Okay. All right, cool. Great. Well, next we're looking at the CUP as the next item of discussion. And the 3 questions put before us are, does the proposed use conform with present and future land uses of the area? Does the proposed use conform with all applicable performance standards? And is only the rear yard used for play or recreational area? Is only the rear yard used for play or recreational area? And is said area fenced, controlled, and screened in compliance with Chapter 918 of the ordinance?
I think it is. I think they had an outline of that back of that property that was fenced.
Yeah, I don't know if we can pull up that slide again. That'd be helpful, just to take a look at that and make sure we're in compliance, but I would imagine you guys have scrutinized over that. I mean, we know that this is unique in the sense that we have a use which requires the space to be used in a certain way.
I'm looking for the plan sheet that would show that a little better. Give me a second.
Okay. Okay, so this is page 55 in the packet. Shows the outdoor recreation area a bit better. There's a mixture of fencing and retaining walls, as I understand.
Right, we had the retaining walls, which pretty much surround the property.
Excuse me, starting in the southeast corner there of the building, we have some retaining walls, and then you'll see where there's that opening, that line with kind of dots in it. that's a indication of fence. So as you move north, you see the retaining wall and then the fence basically on top of the retaining wall. And then you see a fence with a gate at where, that sidewalk hits that back recreation area, and then again, a fence going over to the retaining walls. So between retaining walls and fence, it is secure.
Okay, great, thank you. Any discussion? Anyone have any thoughts on this particular area?
Well, I'm satisfied with that, and I'm sure that the state licensing requirements will determine how they do all of this, far beyond what we might expect. But, yeah.
Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, it appears that they're in compliance on the last issue with this being controlled in a screened-in area. If that's the case, other criteria include, again, the present and future land uses of the site and applicable performance standards. So those are the primary issues. This variance for the conditional use permit, I think, would be appropriate.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything that's jumping at me, so we can potentially move on to item number 4 of our discussion. And there's a list of items we're looking at here. The first is the property owner's proposal reasonable but not permitted by the ordinance? The second is the plight of the landowner due to circumstances unique to the property? And this is with regards to variances. Will the variances granted alter the essential character of the locality? And has the applicant established a practical difficulty in complying with the ordinance? Finally, is the proposal in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the ordinance and consistent with the comprehensive plan? And this is the variance that affects our west wall, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And from looking at it, this is one of the, and listening to the comments and looking at the design, this is one of the items that contributes to, this variance contributes to the massing break and the massing break variations. They're kind of related, essentially, aren't they?
I would say that, yes, Commissioner, the length of the building is affected by this variance. If this variance were not approved, the required setback would be 50 feet. If they moved forward with this existing design, that would make the facility 20 feet shorter. We're not sure of exactly how the applicant would do next if this is not approved, but yes, this would affect the length of the building.
I think it's important to consider this variance with respect to the design deviations because they are interrelated. Commissioner Planton, do you have some thoughts?
Yeah, normally when I would look at this, I would say the variance makes sense. It's up against Highway 12. Being that closer to the highway wouldn't make that much difference for a drive. However, with that variance, we have now a building that's 20 feet longer. And with that is all the problems that are ensuing on the design deviations. So I do have some challenges with this variance. When we look at that, what's the benefit to the community from this variance? I don't see any. Right now, I just see benefit to the applicant. It's not site-derived. And usually there's some greater good for the community when we give variances. So I'm just hesitant on this one because it does become a domino effect on massing and some of these building recesses.
Yeah, those are good points. Thank you. Does anyone else have any follow-up on comment with that on the variance?
I have some questions about that also, and I wondered if it was because they are increasing the number of residents to 80, if that, how much that added on to the length of the building. And it does drive the the deviations, the design standard deviations too. I'd like to hear how other commissioners.
Because you're
feel.
going from 78 to 80, is that?
Well, 70,
residents,
there was
70.
75, I guess,
Yeah.
80.
Yeah.
But it does drive some of the other deviations, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the exact same thought as Commissioner Planton, whereas normally a variance around, like, having less setback against a highway like that wouldn't bother me, but I think it bothers me because of the mass of the building itself. And they have a lot of property to work with, it's just, I think, the design needing to be a specific way for the application that they're having with it, with this memory care. But that's a big building. It's twice the footprint that we have today, in terms of the size. So that's what I have a problem with.
Yeah, and that's directly related to this variance.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that I don't know that 20 feet would fix, though, right? I mean, if
Yeah,
you went
yeah.
back 20 feet to actually be in this 50-feet variance, it's still then going to be a 304-foot building versus a 324-foot building.
Yeah, so do you think that, pausing on the variance for just 1 second and saying, well, could design changes potentially be done in such a way that maybe that variance of the west side could be allotted?
Right.
There's that interplay. Yeah. Commissioner Sorensen, did you?
Yeah, just to confirm again, the setback on the east side is
50.
50 feet?
Correct.
So it's pushed back as far as it can on the east side.
Correct.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I think, what they stated in their narrative, which I'm not advocating for, but just pointing out, this lot is kind of triangular in shape.
Yeah.
Right.
So the farther you go back, the
Yeah.
narrower the envelope.
Yeah.
Did they say also that they pushed the building back a little, so then they got into the angle of the lot more? Did I read that?
It wasn't so much that. I
okay.
think as they looked at other shapes of the building, could you
Yeah.
make it L-shaped or a little bit of an angle? But when you look at what they stated, when you look at the floor plan, that middle hallway is the common areas for the residents, and making that change really breaks up that common area for the residents.
Sorry, making what change?
So this is 180 degrees. If they would have made it curve, like
Right.
120 degrees,
Yeah,
that essentially shrinks the whole length. But doing that breaks one long common area into two, because the residents on one side aren't going to know that there's something for them on the other side.
I respect you said that, what's the difference? Does it make that much of a difference if you take 20 feet off of a 355 width building? Maybe it's to be made up in other ways in the design deviations.
Potentially, yeah.
I don't know how
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yeah, when I initially saw this, I wasn't too concerned about it because
Yeah.
of what's there up against
Right.
the highway and the golf course. But I do think, maybe we, as we talk about the other variance issues, this may become a little more clear. Do we really think this is a good idea or not? Because I think, the long linear nature of this building is what's causing some of the issues that were brought up by the community and that we also have. So maybe it'll gel a little bit better once we talk about
I agree.
the design variations,
I agree. So I think
deviations.
I think it sounds like we need to move on to the design deviations and really hash those out and understand what we are seeing there before we can think further about the variance. All right, so the design deviations, we're looking at, does the proposed design contribute to the improvement of the city's public realm? Is the negative impact caused by each design deviation outweighed by any of the following positives, such as alleviating an undue burden, having a positive effect on the area, permitting greater conformity with other zoning standards or guidance of the design standards, or advancing policies in the city's comp plan.
And Chair, I'll pull up the specific list of deviations here as well. There are technically 6, although the first 2 are a bit redundant to each other. They're just different sections of code, so we want to be sure to cite them and have findings for each. There's really 5 issues to discuss.
Can we maybe look at 5 and 6 first?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, just to,
Yeah.
okay.
I think we could almost eliminate 5 because I can't imagine having a doorway to every resident's room, and why would you have a locked door?
Yeah, that would be,
Just
yeah.
cause agitation to the resident. And the sheet roofing, if they're within, they're better than our standards, I mean,
Yeah, as long as we're not putting anything on the roof, which we can't,
Yeah.
then I don't see, a need to drive that higher in height.
Yeah, I was of a similar thought on both these items, especially on the screening issue. It just pertains to that little passway area. And it was actually better lower than higher, I think, anyway, so
yeah.
I'd be okay with both these deviations.
Okay. Okay, so we can agree on that, and then we can focus on the building recesses and the massing breaks. And, the presence of the building. I think when I was listening and walking, I walked the site today with my dog. It was a lot of fun. And I was really interested to see the parking level, so I'm glad we touched on that. But the thing that really stood out to me is just the distinct tonal difference and material difference of the building as it currently stands, with the brick and then the white on either side. And that is the relative comparison to what we're looking at today. So there's that residual memory of the distinct material use, which does create a breakage, a visual breakage that is actually just visual. It's not material at all. It's just visual. It's material in essence, but there's actually not a distinct buildings, but it feels more distinct because of that very contrasting use of materials. I'm not suggesting that heavy contrast in that way is what's appropriate here. I'm just suggesting that it does help break up the building. The brick is also consistent with other materials that's used, the church on the north side. I'm not saying that we should move to brick. I'm just merely saying that when you kind of look at what is, or what was to what is, and how we move forward comfortably, and with respect to the community feeling, that's something that we need to just be thinking about. And also, color choice and use of color to create visual recesses where there may not be, is always a tool to enhance breakages where there's actually not. But I think the thing that we're really looking at here is the continual facade, right, that's in front of us and is now extended at great length, by 20 feet, and how we feel that works within our community, and how the design standards are designed to make sure that we do create something that feels connected with the residential feel of the neighborhood. It was helpful for you to show us the comparisons you made to properties in the area and the care that you've put into moving us in that direction. My feeling is that we may not be enough in that direction, and I'd like to hear some of the commissioners think about or speak about that or give their comments.
In the proposal, the comments by Moments of February 28th, there was a statement the exterior of the building is influenced by the character of Wayzata. And we run into the word character all the time in trying to describe Wayzata. This has come up over and over and over again. And I know that there are many beautiful homes in the neighborhood that are white, light color, but they're not 355 feet long or wide. And I know right now, white and with black windows is very popular. I just, there's something missing. I don't know. I would love to see the materials. I don't know if you plan to bring them to the council meeting. There's something that, you showed a picture of Folkestone, which is the opposite look as representative of our community. There's something about this that bothers me, and I'm trying to figure out what it is. I'd like to hear other commissioners comment on it.
But you said there's something missing, and I think there's not enough missing. Like, I think it's just, there's so much, like, it's really big.
Oh.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I get that that's the property itself, and trying to change out Meridian Manor's current footprint with this, and I think I'm having the same kind of flashbacks to the TCF building, where it's like, that's that beautiful building on a very long, narrow lot, and we've had a lot of challenges with that
Right.
because of kind of what we picture on that space, and I'm having the same reaction to this, is like, just because you have it doesn't mean you should take it all up. And so I'm, going from seeing a lot of green space and a lot of, kind of blank space to now having the whole, I know the whole property isn't full, but the whole front of that property, that's what I'm having a problem with. It's a lot.
And I think it needs to be more subtle
Maybe.
for my,
I think it's probably a combination of the structure itself, the length and the tone, and the harder edges that collectively create a very distinct, a lot of impact that feels less residential, even though it's residential for a certain group of people. Yes.
Without getting into the architecture, the design, and just kind of looking at the deviation that's requested, which is like the massing breaks, I understand how difficult that is with wanting this walkway connection for the residents. It wouldn't be viable to have a lot of separate buildings. However, the intent of massing breaks are to eliminate monolithic buildings, and I just don't see enough of that here. I'm glad that we're in agreement with extending or not requiring that 3-foot parapet all around, because what that allows us to do is get a little bit of variance in the roof. And we see that in residential buildings, and I think that's very helpful for a project like this. In a deviation, they're appropriate when the purpose and intent of the design guidelines are achieved, but I just don't feel the purpose and the intent of massing breaks is being achieved with this deviation request. And I do believe in the applicant's summary, even they said adding more recesses to the building wouldn't change this. Adding 3 additional recesses would not further enhance the character of the building beyond what's been proposed.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
You want some comments?
Yes, please.
Well, on the massing break issue, I didn't have a big issue with the deviation, I guess. I mean, if you believe that in general, a linear building is important to the operation of the facility, I think what they're trying to accomplish is the intent of the massing breaks. But what we have here is something that's workable, and I would be okay with that deviation. if I could ask just one question, or one thing to confirm on the building recess issue. I think we heard that this recess every 50 feet is particular only to the Bluff District. Is that right?
That's right.
So only in the Bluff District would this be a requirement, therefore it's a requirement here, requiring 7. And what was the initial intent of requiring the every 50-foot break just in the Bluff District?
So the Bluff District is really primarily located actually in this neighborhood right here. So this parcel is just not in a design district, so it defaults to the Bluff District, the most stringent in some ways. Generally, the buildings in this part of town are smaller, less suburban, more of the urban core. So generally, the building widths are smaller in the Bluff District, meaning that the recesses would be more frequent to just generally match that character.
Okay, so we're trying to apply that criteria to this long building, which is a bit of a challenge. I guess, with that in mind, I mean, the recess issue itself, I think, isn't very applicable here, but what is applicable, we heard a lot from the community and from others on the commission, is just, I think, look and feel of the building. I would tend to agree that it's lacking in residential scale and architecture and character, and it starts with kind of the long linear nature of the building. And for some reason, we didn't feel that way about Moments. I mean, when you looked at that facility, it had a kind of a nice, homey residential feel. Nice houses across the street. You don't really see much of the commercial or the institutional space around the corner. But this, I think, has more of a look and feel of a kind of institutional, a little bit monolithic design. And I appreciate the intent, trying to break it up. But I'm not sure that this is really, the way this looks is really the best thing for our community. If it had a much more of a residential flavor to it, I think it would be much more appealing. And I think, the other deviations that are being considered here are reasonable and appropriate and comply with their criteria. That was my kind of big issue with looking at this application. The first time I looked at it, and it's kind of still something that I think is important.
Yeah. I think we have concern over the design deviations, right? I mean, but not too much. I guess my point is essentially that the potential color or material changes can maybe impact the effect that massing breaks or recesses would have otherwise presented, or otherwise solved for, given the fact that we have this bluff issue and more massing breaks, or recesses required, but we're not doing them, is one thing. But I guess I'm seeing a potential solve in a different way through material or color. Not that I'm supposed to be solving anything, but can't help it, I'm a designer. But sort of focusing back on the deviations themselves, how are we going to look back now with variance on the west side variance, in terms of how are we thinking about that now as we look at the overall length of the building? Still a question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's still a no-go because it just extends this massive building another 20 feet, and so I'm still a no-go on that one.
I don't think it's significant.
Sorry?
I don't think it's significant, whether it's 335 feet or 355 feet. I still think we have to focus back on the look of the building and how we address that.
Thoughts circling back to the variance on the side.
I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference in what the major objections are to this proposal. And it's just if you look at what we're looking at on screen, it takes up the entire frontage of the lot, and I just don't feel like that's appropriate. We have a nice green space between the church parsonage and then the large church building. Even though they're institutional lots as well, things are broken up enough to still feel compatible with the neighborhoods where they are, still feel residential. This building just doesn't feel like a residential building. I know it's institutional, but it's a residence for the residents. It just doesn't feel that way.
So it's about the character of the locality, right?
That's certainly part of it, but.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it possible, just to throw this out there, that if there was a variance, that somehow we could get more deviations, more design compliance for the design standards? I mean, is that something we want to even contemplate?
I think I would. I mean, if I think about, going back to the other institutional properties along Wayzata Boulevard, you've got the Wayzata Country Club, which is a beautiful building. You've got Lutheran Church, I think, is a nice, stone building, and Wayzata Community Church, the brick building, and has, I think, different design standards. So I think there are other institutional industrial buildings along that corridor that are its neighbors that do have a look and feel that match the look and feel and the character, I think, of the neighborhood itself. So I think if it would look something more like, the Wayzata Country Club, then it would maybe feel better here. I don't, than this, yeah.
Okay. All right, those are really good thoughts. Any more thoughts on either the design design deviations or the variance?
I don't have a problem with the massing breaks. I like those corridors, they're all glass, they're from the back and the front, so it's a very narrow glass corridor. And in a way, I'm glad you can see through it. We looked at that, I know, for the TCF building and one other one, didn't we? Wells, yeah. And we accepted that, and I'm okay with that deviation.
Commissioner Gellner, we have like those 5 or 6 deviations. When we go through, do we need to kind of go through each one?
Yeah, and I've been taking notes along the way too,
Okay.
and try to sense what some potential findings could be for each of those. I think the one that we haven't discussed in detail is parking location yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So we need to go back to that. The parking
Ideally, yeah.
deviation, let's focus on that again. Thank you for redirecting us there. Further thoughts on parking?
So can you confirm the parking, does that need to be a deviation if we go to industrial, or, I'm sorry, institutional? Or would the parking where it is match the new zone, or the new institutional?
Parking, since design standards must be complied with for new construction, they're required to move the parking to the back during that new construction process unless a deviation is requested. So the comp plan and zoning map amendment are technically not really relevant to that piece.
So I guess, I don't know, I'm reconsidering, given, thinking about what other buildings are along there as you enter from the west. You've got the country club, you've got the 2 churches, and they all have parking right there in the front. And given that a lot of it is screened and it's lower than the street, I mean, I don't love it, but I understand why they did it, so that they can have a lot more room in the back for the residents. So I think in that case, I would be comfortable with that.
Yeah. And I like the fact that the level's the same and they're adding a lot of trees. And we've also approved parking in the front before.
Yeah,
So is that. So I think we're okay
Yeah.
with parking.
Yeah.
I think we have consensus
Yeah.
on that.
I had very similar thoughts about the parking.
Yeah. And that's a really good point about the church and the country club. I didn't even think of that. Yeah. Okay, so I think we've covered all the design deviations now. The variance, we still have some discord on. But I think we can go back to, I think we have some sort of consensus really on all the items, right? Did I miss anything? I don't think so. I
don't think so, Chair. I think we had sufficient conversation on each of these. I can run through what I was hearing, if that.
I would appreciate that,
helpful.
yeah, that'd be
Okay.
very helpful.
So I was hearing support from most commissioners on the numbers 1, 2, and 3. I would just note that for number 3, you were noting that you were comfortable with an elderly care facility in the institutional zoning district and that you weren't recognizing major impacts there. I would just kind of note that generally the discomfort that is being had with request 4 and then 5, of course, has multiple requests, is that the shape of this building for an which is to accommodate an elderly care facility, is causing concern and causing some potential findings of denial for the request number 4 and 5. I still think then when we're talking about request 4 and 5, I'll just reiterate what I was hearing. For the 4th request, which is the variance, I was hearing that while it is close to the highway side, which is really the side that's least impacted by a setback variance, the building is already a lot longer than the existing building in that place. It's generally a long building for our city, and with the character of our city, we don't generally see a lot of parcels with buildings that long. And so adding a setback variance here may not contribute to the character of the locality. Even though some commissioners noted that 20 feet doesn't make a huge difference, I think I was starting to hear that a majority still weren't feeling comfortable with moving forward with a variance there because of the issues around character of the locality due to the width of the building. So that's what I heard for the variance. For the design standards, I was hearing general support for parking location. I was hearing general support for unit entries and for the screening of sheet roofing. And then we were still having concerns about building recesses and massing break. And the conversation I heard surrounding that is that this is, it's a combination of the length of the structure, the harder edges and the color that's really creating some visual impact that's making this property feel less residential. And in essence, our massing breaks and building recesses are there to help reduce the length of the structure, honestly, and the feeling of the length of the structure. That was when we created the massing breaks, that was what they were created for, was our concern about very long buildings in our community.
Correct.
That didn't have a break. But I was hearing that, it could be a good idea to have perhaps the glass hallway, but it didn't seem to be really the design solution that felt that the positives were outweighing the negatives. And that's really what the criteria for design standards are really all about. You really need to be able to find that, the negative impact of the deviation is outweighed by one of the following factors. And I just wasn't hearing quite enough support that you were seeing a positive effect on the project by granting the building recess and massing break deviations. I think the massing break discussion was a more robust discussion. We just got a few comments about building recesses, just that, the Bluff District is more restrictive. And perhaps that, the question was, is that the right fit for this area? A couple of you noted that the color, while, color may comply with the design standards, it seems it's perhaps contributing to just how large and long the building feels. So I would say, Chair, I think what I was hearing is that there was not perhaps going to be a majority support for building recesses or massing break, but I appreciate if I missed anything important there to clarify, and then the variance was still kind of up in the air too.
It sounds comprehensive to me. Did anyone catch anything that was missed or wanted to add anything that they now?
I guess I would just maybe make sure that the opinion expressed about the massing breaks is really where we are. Because I'm fine, I'm okay with the massing breaks, and I maybe had the opinion that
I was too.
that we were generally in concurrence with that, or
I feel like
a question.
I feel like the where I'm sort of in between, if you will, is that if the appearance of massing breaks could be achieved through a material contrast or something like that, that the massing breaks wouldn't make such a big deal. Do you know what I'm saying? Like aesthetically.
The massing bricks are pretty much glass now, is that right?
Yes.
So you can
Yeah, but on
kind of,
the-
you can kind of see through them?
On the ground level, it's not though, right?
Correct. In the ground level, it's not even required on the ground level, so that's okay the way it is. That second floor should really be completely, there should be no structure whatsoever on that second floor, but they have a glass hallway.
But the ground's fine as it is.
Correct.
Yeah, I guess that's what makes the most impact on me, though, is the ground. So, yeah, I guess that's why I got thinking about color changes to create more visual breaks in lieu of an actual massing break compliance, if that makes sense.
Does that follow our design guidelines, though, just a color break?
So our design standards, I don't think dictate a color for that first floor massing
No, I
break,
mean,
so.
for massing break, does color, are you saying just color and nothing else?
No,
I'm sorry, I
saying-
misunderstood.
I'm
Okay.
saying that I'm saying that the visual impact, I think, could be changed by potentially color or
Okay,
material.
okay,
But it's
now I
not
understand.
but it does comply with the color material as it is. It's a subjective thing. But it relates to the fact that we were talking about massing breaks because that's what massing breaks are for, to create visual breaks.
And they're required above first floor.
Yes, but only above first floor, yeah.
And to be clear, the massing break we're talking about is that glass walkway. So I don't, at core, have a problem with that. I think it's a really clever, innovative way to connect those buildings. I get what they're saying of, the residents having to go down and then back up, or up and then back down. So I get how they're flowing, so I don't have a problem with that. I think it's, again, just the size of the building itself that necessitates having these massing breaks is, again, sort of going back to the side yard variance is the same issue.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's right.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I'm glad we cleared that up. Thank you. Okay, well, it sounds like we have consensus on all, or some full discussion on all points. Can anyone make a motion this evening?
Where do we even start?
Yeah, I think,
I guess that's a question, Chair. Do we do each one of these?
yeah, do we want to break it down section by section for a motion, or would we do it collectively?
Chair, I would recommend making a recommendation on each of the requests, including each of those design standards. If you can do it all in one motion, that's great. I think staff could assist you in doing that, if staff has a clear understanding of what the consensus is.
Okay, well, that's what we need to do. Can anyone do that? Yeah, we have another question, actually, Commissioner
So,
Sorensen.
So was the suggestion one motion, but make the recommendation on each one of these?
Each one.
Yes, Chair and Commissioner,
after
that's,
one
that's correct. And, if it's helpful, I think I heard, and staff can correct, you're prepared to make and recommend approval to City Council of just about everything other than perhaps a variance and one deviation. I'm not even sure about that, but my colleagues might be. Is that generally correct, though?
I don't know if we have consensus on one of
Yeah.
two of the deviations, but,
You might want to discuss those out then before calling for a motion.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
Eva?
Side deviation?
Oh.
Is in question, maybe?
let's side variance.
Yeah.
Yeah, the variance, I'd like to clarify that.
Okay. I feel like we don't have consensus on the variance on the side at all, right?
I would say no to the side variance just because I think it goes to the point, I don't want to give a variance to then say that we would be okay with having a building that size.
Yeah.
So that's where I would,
I'm okay with the variance.
Commissioner Douglas, what?
I said
She's
I'm okay with the variance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I am not okay with the variance.
I'm okay with the variance.
I'm okay with the variance.
Okay. I was hearing a majority in approval of the variance then.
So Chair, just again, clarity for staff here, was there a recommendation to deny any of these things?
This was just the side variance.
Correct.
Yeah.
And on the deviations, did we have clarity on that?
On the design deviations, we had consensus on 3 of the 5,
Okay.
but 2 we did not.
I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. Be good to get clarity on those two.
Can I see the 5 deviations on the board again?
Yes, you can.
Page 22 has a nice,
There we go.
all of them. Yeah.
And so number 3 and 4 are the
two.
the ones that were not quite on consensus.
And we just,
yet of.
and we just talked about the massing breaks, and we clarified the confusion on that, right? So it's just the building recesses.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Commissioner Planton?
I'm not in favor for item number 3, building recesses.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Oh, the recesses? Yeah, I'm not in favor of that.
Did you say not? I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said not
No.
in favor? Okay.
Against number 3.
Is this the one with the little pass-through?
No.
That's 4. Okay, yeah. No, I'm not in favor of 3 either.
Yeah, I'm also not in favor, so we have consensus on not being in favor with that one.
Okay. And then can I just clarify for number 4, where we were at with that one?
I am not in favor. I think it's an ingenious solution to the problem, but it's not, the building's just too big. It solves part of the problem. I think it's a great way to try to connect them, but they do not still feel like 3 distinct buildings to me.
So if the mass, is that the building was smaller, I guess maybe it's a moot point because we don't know how much smaller the building would be, but in theory, the building is smaller, you aren't going to need as many massing breaks, and you're not going to need the variance, right?
I think that's a good point. This would still be needed for what the applicant has provided for any building longer than 150 feet.
Okay.
But if it was 300 feet or less, we'd only be talking about 1 instead of 2. So there would still be a massing break deviation, but there would be less of them.
So, and we're looking at this specific deviation of the 2, right? So then, okay, so then in that case, I agree with Planton that I think it's an ingenious solution, but I wouldn't be in favor of it because it signifies that the building is too big, in my opinion.
I'm very much okay with this deviation because I don't think the building is operable without it.
I would agree with that, with Commissioner Sorensen on that one. It's just,
Yeah, this is really tough because the building operates, has to function in a certain way. And we've already agreed that this complies with all the community needs and at great length, we've worked through all those points. But at the same time, we have a level of discomfort. But in order for it to operate and function, I would have to be okay with the deviation.
Can I just clarify, did you recommend approval of that deviation? Okay. Okay, I can summarize for you once again. Thank you. So what I heard was approval, you're recommending approval of I'll just list the deviations first. Recommending approval of number 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. Parking location, building recesses, unit entries, and screening of sheet roofing. Is that right? Oh, no, I got that wrong. Massing break was the one I got wrong. Let me restate it. was typing while talking, not easy all the time. Okay, so of the deviations that I heard was support for number 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
Correct.
And denial of number 3.
Yeah.
From the other requests, there was support for the comprehensive plan amendment, the zoning map amendment, the side yard setback variance. And then numbers 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6.
So I have a question. If that's the motion made, if I disagree or I'm not in favor of the building recesses and the variance, the side yard variance, how do I vote?
Chair and Commissioner, I would recommend you vote no. You wouldn't be in favor of everything in the motion.
So the motion is going to be all one instead of individual.
That's my recommendation on procedure, yeah.
And some of the comments, be them subjective or otherwise, are included, right?
All of the comments, Chair, should be, in substance, included in the minutes. And I would encourage, when we bring back the draft report, that you look at it carefully and also look at the meeting minutes to make sure your concerns are expressed accurately for council when they consider the application.
Okay, so I think then we're ready to make a motion, but we need that language, which is going to be long, I think.
I'm happy to repeat it again.
Okay, that'd be great.
Dr. Ball. What I heard was recommendation of approval for a comprehensive plan amendment, a zoning map amendment, a variance for side yard setback, and deviations from the design standards for parking location, massing break, unit entries, and screening of sheet roofing, and the recommendation of denial of the building recesses design deviation.
And Chair, just to supplement that, I think the motion would be to direct staff to prepare a draft report and recommendation with supporting findings of, on each of the requests in the application that were just articulated by our director.
Okay. Does a commissioner want to make that motion this evening?
I believe I could be okay, but I would repeat everything she said.
You don't need to repeat. It's in the record. You could just say you would like to make that motion.
Oh.
Unless you want to make a different motion.
Well, it would be that motion, it's just the wordage of the motion.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Tell us the wordage of the motion again.
Yeah. Motion would be to direct staff to prepare a draft report and recommendation with supporting findings with the recommendations articulated by Director Gellner just a moment ago.
You want me to, I can list them if you like.
Approval of.
If you want to go ahead.
Okay. Can I have a, okay, can I have a, I'll make the motion. Can I have a motion to direct staff to prepare a draft report and recommendation of approval?
Well, Chair, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be the complicated, because
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah, I think make a draft report and recommendation with supporting findings,
Supporting?
making the recommendation on each of the requests in the application. Oh, you've got something there?
I mean, basically, direct staff to prepare a commission report and recommendation with appropriate findings reflecting a recommendation on the variances requested in the application for review and adoption at the next commission meeting?
You know, Chair, why don't
we need
I
to.
just read the whole thing so that we're not piecing it together? I think that might be easier at this point. So this is the motion I would recommend. Yeah, staff to prepare a draft report and recommendation with supporting findings, recommending approval of the comprehensive plan amendment, zoning map amendment, conditional use permit, variance to side yard setback, design standard deviation for parking location, there's 2 of them, building recess, unit entries, and screening of sheet roofing.
Not building recess.
I'm sorry, I got that wrong. Strike that. Massing break. Unit entries, screening of sheet roofing, and denial of building recess deviation for consideration at your next Planning Commission meeting.
And Commissioner Sorensen, you're proposing that, with his
Sure.
verbiage. Okay,
I'll
perfect.
make that motion.
And we have that in record, so he doesn't have to repeat it, and we've got it correct. Great. Thank you.
Excuse me, we're taking a vote on this?
We still need a second on the motion, and I can do a roll call vote.
Yes.
I'll second Douglas.
Okay.
Saying Commissioner Douglas has seconded, so now we're going to take a roll call vote.
So all those in favor will say aye, and I'll do a roll call, starting with Commissioner Planton.
Nay.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Aye.
Commissioner Stockton.
Aye.
Commissioner Douglas.
Aye.
Commissioner Severson.
Nay. And I want to, can I make on the record to show that I am not in favor of variance to the side yard setback? I'm not in favor of the building recess or massing break deviations.
So Chair, I'll note that that motion passed with a majority of 3-2.
Thank you. Okay, the motion passes. The draft report and recommendation is going to be on the consent agenda at our next meeting, and after adoption, we'll go on to City Council for further consideration. Thank you to the applicant, staff, and all members of the public for participating. Appreciate that very much, and all your input. Next, we can move on to other items. We have review of development activities and the Planning Commission meeting schedule.
Yes, Chair. So we have our next meeting on Monday, May 6th. We'll have 3 items on the agenda on May 6th. The first item is a application for 425 Highcroft Road. It's a variance request for the front yard setback. We'll have materials on our city website this week for that, 425 Highcroft Road. The second application for review on May 6th is updates to our tree ordinance, so our forester Bennett Myron will be here for that. And then our third item on May 6th is updates to our chicken keeping ordinance. And Nick Keiser will be available for that presentation. I do anticipate having meetings in May and early June, and I will let you know about the summer months as well. I try to consolidate items in the summer due to busy summer schedules if I can. If you have specific dates that you need to be gone or you'd like me to just consider you might be gone, please let me know and I'll try to do what I can to work with that. And that's all I have tonight.
What's in July? Which, are we orange?
We are the yellow, or it's
Yellow.
kind of a
8 and
light
20
orange,
and 22nd?
dark. It's
8 and
the,
22nd July.
For July, it's July 8th and 22nd.
Yes, I think I've already noted this, but I'm not present out of the country on the 22nd of July.
And I'll be out of town June 17th.
Okay. Yep, great. I have
Thank
both
you.
of those down. I appreciate knowing in advance, and we'll do what we can to have maximum attendance when we can.
Thank you.
Okay, this concludes our agenda. We can now adjourn. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second?
Wonderful. All those in favor, please
race
say
you.
aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The motion passes, and the Monday, April 22nd, 2024, Wayzata Planning Commission is adjourned.